surrounding yourself with people that are going to ask you tough questions, that are going to challenge you and push back against you because they love you, because they love the purpose that you're behind. And many times you don't even realize it. It's not overnight. It's when you've stopped keeping track. It's when you just poured into and said, this is just what I'm going to do now. What's interesting about this is, as an atheist or as a Christian, you have a choice to make. You decide whether there is or there isn't.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Legacy Men's podcast here at the Depot at Cornerstone Church. My name is Gary Trevor, your host. My co-host, Jason Gonzalez.
Hey, y'all. Thank you very much for stopping by. I got to thank you again for subscribing, checking this information out on Spotify and YouTube there. Don't forget to share some of this content as well. Gary, who do we have here today?
So today we have Andrew Stevens, and our topic is how to become an authentic, disciplined leader. Andrew, do us a favor, introduce us to your profession and your background and why you're on the show today.
Oh, thank you, gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be with you guys today. It's a real honor to be in front of you both. My background is I'm the director for the Center for Executive Medicine, Primary Care Concierge Practice. I'm also the executive director for Sprolo, which is a digital marketing agency serving clients nationwide, but also founded right here in Chandler, Arizona. And my background really, Gary, I mean, going back to where this all comes from, is I come from a military family. My mother was in the Navy, and it comes from a background of men and women that served our nation for many generations prior to that. At a young age, my mom had the opportunity to interview for a very prestigious role. She was given the opportunity to interview for the White House medical director, which would essentially put her as the physician to the President of the United States. She was able to be accepted to that position, and she served under President William Jefferson Clinton for 8 years of administration, and which brought myself and my family out to Northern Virginia, where she served there in the White House for those years, which was just a pivotal point in my life. But really what it did also is it threw me right into the healthcare field from a very young age. I like to say I was born to a family of doctors and healthcare providers. And ever since then, I've been in leadership positions that served people from a healthcare perspective, but oftentimes in the background, in sort of the periphery of in supporting and making sure those medical providers were well taken care of.
Awesome. And also she retired as an admiral, understand?
Correct. Yeah, as a parting gift from Bill Clinton was to actually promote her into a rear admiral position and send her off on her way into retirement.
And then at some point she had written a book about her life as well. As a White House doctor, I understand.
That's right, yes. So she wrote the book, The White House Doctor, My Patients Were Presidents. It's a memoir of her life, and she talks about her background, what life was like at the White House, being the doctor there, meeting lots of foreign dignitaries, the president and the family, as well as also what her life looked like back at home. While coming from a military background, she was driven by duty from the very beginning. She knew the path laid in front of her meant that she was to perform at a very, very high level all the time. And part of that meant somewhat being married to your profession,
right,
and ensuring that the duty of your job comes first and the country comes first, which is very admirable. And while doing so, she articulates in her book what that meant to not only her career, but also to her family,
right,
that was there supporting her, but often sometimes taking a little bit of a back seat to what she was doing in her life.
And so you tell us that you were basically raised in San Diego with your dad, and your dad was a lawyer. Tell us about your growing up, but most important was, tell us when you actually received Christ as Savior and the expression you gave us that defined from the world to being a Christian.
Absolutely. So my dad during this was an atheist, did not believe in a God, and fundamentally because he was raised in a family where almost everything was a God. There was lots of different religions and theologies that were explored, and so much so that he felt that none of them transpired into really beneficial anything for his family. He saw a lot of chaos and turmoil, divorces, and just conflict and strife, and so he felt that, you know what, that's not working for me. This religion thing is not something that's benefiting my life or my family's life. I don't want anything of it. I'm going to focus on none of that. Meanwhile, he meets my mom, his wife, who comes from a Catholic background. So he was sort of thrust into always some religion around him too. So I was raised in this family circumstance of having a very strong Catholic upbringing, but also this idea of critical thinking around what religion was. Now, my dad's story leads into mine. It's a very important one because he, throughout his legal career as a lawyer, started to look at religion and God from that lens. from thinking about what's the logic behind this? Is there really more to this story? And start to research. Lawyers do a lot of research in their line of profession. So he started to look into it, and certain books like Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ came upon him, where he just articulates what it meant to follow Christ and who Christ was and all of the evidences that showed why Jesus was real and who he really was, and actually brought my father to Christ through this exploration through a logic side of things, which was just fascinating. And so during the Catholic masses that we'd go to as kids, when I was there with him, he'd always kind of lean over at me and just give me little nuggets of biblical wisdom and say, hey, take a look at this, take a look at that. And in so doing, was imparting his leadership, spiritual leadership on our family by never taking away God and truth as paramount in our relationship and mine and his relationship.
I think one of the things that you expressed that was difficult still as an atheist was the promises that happen after you die. Right, and how much he struggled with that piece, whether it be with his, I believe it was his mom or grandmother, and just like the different forms of religions and things that are talked about after you pass, and how difficult he found that to believe in, right? So then with Christ, he accepted Christ as well, right?
That's right. And what's interesting about this is, as an atheist or as a Christian, you have a choice to make. You decide whether there is or there isn't. And that's a really important decision, because no matter which way you go, you got to go all in on that. It's sitting on the sideline and thinking, well, I'm not sure about it, is a dangerous spot to be.
Correct.
So there's actually a lot of faith going into someone being an atheist to say, you know what, I'm choosing to not believe and purposely aligning my life in that direction. And he decided that that was not the way truly of how he wanted to go about it. He found that Christ was the truth and aligned his life with that, and wanted to make sure his family was brought along with it.
What age was this at that he started to make that decision?
This would have been for him late 20s, early 30s.
In your life?
Some crossover. So yes. So like, I think I was born, and it was right around the same time that I was just a little baby. He was starting to really solidify his identity and what that looked like for him.
So one of your toughest moments that you shared with us was, for one, moving, right? So right at the age of 5, psychologically, you were talking about, you're developing a lot of different emotions, and that's the toughest time to move from one space to the next. So you had to move, right? So he had kind of been built in his faith. And then you started going to a Christian school at some point in time as well.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, at that time, at very pivotal point, we moved with my mom's job, going out to Virginia, uprooted my life away from family, and that was a struggle for me. And actually, at that point in time, I started to develop a speech impediment. That was really a struggle that I had throughout my life, that I've always kind of attributed back to some of that turmoil that happened with that change. And we'll get back to some of that as we go along in my story. But once we got to Virginia, got plugged into a school out there called Emmanuel Christian School, still out there. And while I was there, there was such a wonderful group of kids and students that I became friends with, and they invited me to start going to the youth group that was there, which was associated with the Bible church. While on that, our youth pastor invited me to come out to a Bible camp. And while I was at the Bible camp going into it, I didn't think much of it, but I knew that we're going to talk about Christianity and the Bible and all that. And so there was one particular night, and I can remember it vividly, where I heard the gospel again in a way that I had never heard before. And I felt just the power of the Holy Spirit convict me to say, this is it, Andrew. You've heard about this your whole life, but now is the decision that you can make. And I was only 11 years old at the time. And I remember very specifically that moment when I closed my eyes, and it was like in the movie The Wizard of Oz,
right?
If you guys have seen this, where it starts off in black and white in the beginning. And that was like my life prior to this moment, where I closed my eyes and things are black and white. And I accepted Christ into my life, and my eyes opened, and it's vivid color. And everything around me since that day forward has always been in color. And I've never been able to shake the color, no matter how much my potential things I fall into may have caused me to possibly stray from God. I never left the room with him. Sometimes your positioning is a little bit away. Sometimes you're doing things that you feel like you regret later on as you get tempted towards different stuff. And I felt like I've never left it. I've always been able to stay in communication with God throughout my life. And I I attribute that to the leadership of someone like my dad, who was always, again, someone to say, hey, keep pointing this back to Christ, keep pointing this back to God in your relationship there. So that's been very powerful.
That's cool.
And a big example for you as you grew up as well is that your dad basically had to, how do I say this respectfully, had to come under basically and support your mum, which is a reverse role for what men really do. Men are running the program, and wife comes under the man, because she was now this uppity up person within the military establishment. So what did you reap from seeing your father, this established lawyer, this good thinking, solid lawyer? What did he offer to you that really benefited you as you grew up from those times?
That's right. It's really the tale of two leaders in my family, which is fascinating. You see my mom, who's following the course of duty and knowing what the mission is and leading her family towards that. And you see my dad, who had a blossoming legal career in San Diego, have to say goodbye to that and to move out to a state that he was not licensed in and establish this new aspect of his career, but really turning his focus towards raising two boys, myself and my brother, at home, and putting the family first. And I think that's one thing, as we talk about what good leadership looks like, is putting those around you and their needs as most important, as looking to them and authentically recognizing their needs as something that you are going to get around and support and to push forward, but at the same time also leading and guiding with principles and values along the mission that we're going along. We're saying, hey, we're in this together, but I'm going to also look after you. I want to make sure that you're taken care of here.
Right.
And that's not something you do overnight, guys. You know this. With leadership, leadership cannot be established in one specific moment. A position can be established in a moment, but true leadership takes that dedication and consistency of day after day after day of putting in that work, so that not only do you get the benefits of bringing along people towards whatever goal it is, or supporting your people, your team, or your family, but also that authentic nature of who you are and what you stand for is shown because you've been putting in those moments after moments after moments. I can only think back to my dad at this point as a loving father who took care of his children and looked after his family because of the day after day after day that he committed to that. That would not have happened in one.
Yeah, that's where
moment.
that discipline comes in. That's why I like how you chose that authentic, disciplined leader, because it takes both to have that, like, habitually, right? To be able to form that in others too.
Exactly.
Correct.
So then basically you moved back to Arizona.
That's right. So my mom, with retirement from the Navy, she had her pick of the litter when it came to where she wanted to work. And as a doctor, she looked around and she got offers from many different places. And one of them was the Mayo Clinic. So she had the decision at the time that she didn't find too difficult of whether or not to go to Rochester, Minnesota, or sunny Scottsdale, Arizona.
Absolutely.
And so she chose, after living in DC for the 8 years that we did, she wanted a little change of pace, some more sunshine, back closer to family, actually in California. So we came out to Arizona. She worked for the Mayo Clinic for a few years before deciding to spin off and start up her own concierge medical practice, Center for Executive Medicine, which I now work for, actually, as we've been bringing on new doctors, physicians, and patients as well.
So at what age did you come back to Arizona, and then what did you do? Did you attend college when you came here? Were you college age at this point before you started?
So I actually, right around the same time I was going into high school. So I came out to Arizona, went right into high school, went into a Christian high school out here, Scottsdale Christian Academy, and continued to grow and develop in my faith while I was there. I think it was a fantastic upbringing in that way, learned a lot of Bible, really dug into that. And then after graduating there, I went to Arizona State University here, and that's where I felt the first real time that I started to maybe stray a little bit more from my faith.
Did you call it drifting, you said?
Drifting is a good word, Gary. Yes. So I felt like there were other moments, and one in particular that I felt was unfortunate was there was a particular time where I felt like the community that I was around there, where maybe I was where some of the Christian community I was with, I didn't feel sometimes the embrace or the love that maybe I'd felt before.
Right.
And I noticed that maybe there were others outside of that would embrace me more than it. And I decided to say, let me check this out and see if that's really where I should be going. And the whole time hearing God say, it's not the way you should be moving this direction. And so,
Right.
but with it, I still decided to go that route. But I even through college, actually, biggest blessing to me of going through ASU was meeting my wife on the first day at ASU, and actually met her at the opening orientation, and we were friends for many years at that point, and it was only until years later that we sort of reconnected, and I saw her as just a beautiful woman, and we got married. And but even between all of that, something that she always convicted me on that I appreciated her for was she would always speak truth to me, even when we were just friends, or even when it was something that might have risked her relationship with me. She would always ask me the tough questions. And she would ask me the things that no one else was going to ask, to say, hey, are you really doing this for the right reasons? Hey, are you thinking about what's most important in your life, or are you just going along with the flow? And I hated hearing it, but I also loved her for it. I needed that truth.
Right.
And she, as a Christian as well, was just speaking that into me. And so I was like, I'm never going to let this one go.
This
She's
was
going to stick
before
around.
you guys were dating, right? Where
Yes.
she called you out for the first time. So when you say risking the relationship, it was like, I think you had mentioned it, and we do this, right? We fall into like pleasing other people and just
Right.
kind of, falling in with the crowd and all that good stuff. You end up, instilling some bad things in your life, hanging out with the wrong people. And I think she asked you something very specific, right?
Yes.
It's like,
Yeah.
so-
Oh, yeah, tell us about
So
that,
I
please do.
I think at that time I was, so actually right around the same time, she knew me during my parents, who fundamentally got divorced after 25 years of marriage, right around the same time I was going into my sophomore year of college. And my wife knew me, or my friend at the time, future wife, knew me then, and I started to do behaviors of a lot of people pleasing. I didn't want to lose anybody else. So I would do whatever I could out of my way to bring people closer to me, whether that meant spending money on them or throwing parties or whatever that looked like, to just not be alone. But in so doing was not genuine friendships in many
Right.
ways. It was just trying to keep numbers, and she noticed that. And one time, we were just hanging out and talking, and she asked me the question. She says, you do a lot of things for other people, but does anybody do anything for you? And what she was asking in that moment was, you're doing all this stuff in this direction, and what are you doing it for?
yeah.
Are you genuinely
How
trying
are
to-
they benefiting you?
Yeah, right. And is this
Yeah.
is this a one-way street, a two-way street? And she was just asking that question because she just noticed it, and nobody else, especially people who were getting things from me, would ask that question at that time. And so I thought that was just a powerful thing. And as I think about, again, good leadership and my lessons along my life path toward becoming a leader and being one in my careers as well as outside of that, is that surrounding yourself with people that are going to ask you tough questions, that are going to challenge you and push back against you because they love you, because they love the purpose that you're behind. They're going to ask those things, and you may not like it in the moment. In fact, sometimes you're going to hate it, and you're not going to want to address it, but that's what you should be cultivating. If you're going to be a good leader, you need to surround yourself with community and individuals who know you well enough to say, hey, you're doing something that I don't think you want to really do.
Yeah.
Take a look at that again.
Yeah. It's like
and
we
I-
all got to walk around with like red challenge flags in our back pocket. You know what I mean?
Super Bowl
Challenge.
Sunday, right?
Yeah.
But I want to hop on again. We had a previous speaker as well. So really and truly, husbands need to value and listen to their wives. They have an intuition that I believe only God gives the woman. That sixth sense, that sense of, I'm married to you, I know you, I love you, let me speak truth to you. So I just want to encourage men across the country as they listen to Andrew here. He's a man's man, but he stopped to listen to his wife because she had something to say that was rich and true, and that helped set him free. And I think we need to just give value to our wives and stop long enough to say, you know what, honey, I love you. I appreciate the truth you give me because it keeps me free and whole. So that's that, because I know you've got a fantastic wife. I got a wonderful wife
and it's
as well.
just,
So
to keep women encouraged too,
Amen.
right? That you can be bold and that it's going to make a change. You had made a reference about, as well, just in the faith, right? In regards
Right.
to other men that you surround yourself with,
Right.
That I loved. It was about the bridge and what goes into the foundation. Can you?
So what I shared was that basically we want to have a bridge that its pylons don't just float on the water, but the pylons are built right into the actual ocean bed. So as the bridge is built and it's transit constantly back and forth with traffic, it'll hold time. Whereas whereas you just put pylons down and float it on top, you got this constant doing this sort of stuff. Whereas the pylons are in the bridge and the bridge is built over it, it can take years and years of traffic and years and years of traffic of our own lives. And I think listening to you just excites my soul that as a young man, you've had a good shoulders on you, really good shoulders, and your dad was a great example. And I think dads, again, it's a critical part. You watch the example of your dad, and as you said, your parents divorced after 25 years, but that was amicable in the sense that your mom was called to duty. So even though the divorce is broken and leaves jagged edges, over time that is healed, and there's still good reciprocal people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I thought what was bringing you and your wife together is that, so now you start to look for churches again, right? And I don't know, is this when you guys already had kids?
Not yet. No, we
Okay.
had just gotten married.
Okay.
And we were both knowing we wanted to plug into a church and dedicate that and raise our family eventually in one. We started to look for a church nearby.
Yeah, because you guys weren't really, I guess, practicing the faith, right? It was just kind of like, okay, cool, we know who Christ is, we know that we've accepted him, but we're not in that practice right now.
We seemed to church hop a bit in terms
Yeah.
of just, she and I would both, try out different ones here and there, but nothing that we really found ourselves committing to. And I think that was a really key part about our marriage is we wanted to base our marriage on being committed to not only one another, but also to foundations that we believe in together, and root our family into a foundation that is rooted together on something strong and enduring.
Okay, so walk us through this challenge, right? Because you know, a lot of people church shop, and that's healthy. Like, you should go check out, different churches. That for you, for some reason, it's just about the Holy Spirit. If it calls you and you're at the right place at the right time, that's just nothing against that, right? But one of the things that I really loved about what you were talking about when you were like, gosh, like, we want to get this out of the church. We would love for the church to do this and do that, and we want to feel this way. And then y'all prayed about it. Can you walk us through what the answer to the prayer was?
Yeah, and I, as you said that, I
Just got
think
the chills because people need to hear this.
They do.
I think back to the time in my life when I was looking for the church to give me recognition and to give me comfort. And at a time in my life, back in that college time frame, when my decision was to lean away from the church. And I said, I'm not getting what I want out of it. Maybe I'll look for it somewhere else. And seeing how that pathway was not one. It's bumps and bruises along the way to finally come back to another decision only years later that you just brought out again, which was my wife and I now, again, looking for community, looking for a group that we can call our own and raise a family in, and we're being very critical thinkers about it. And we find Cornerstone, and we got plugged in. We had some friends already there, which was fantastic, and we found this little small church that was there that was starting to thrive. It was for young married people, and we started to plug into this. But even with that, we hadn't felt yet this feeling like maybe we fully belonged. And we started to ask that question. I remember one night in particular, my wife and I were talking about it, and she started to cry a little bit, and we were just like thinking like together, man, like, is this really the church for us if we're not feeling like we're getting what we want from it? Like, we're not feeling that. And we took a moment to pray about it, and there was like this just calm and resolve to say, no, wait a second. What we want to do is we want to lean back. We want to love on those that are there. We want to be committed to it, regardless of this moment here. We're gonna make it actually a goal of ours to not only go every Sunday, but to do more than that. We want to start getting connected in with other people.
Amen.
We want to love on them, and it was by doing those steps that now, fast forward 10 years later, I've seen just this beautiful path that we started to follow, where we started to create genuine relationships with people at the church here. We started to get into positions where we got to be able to start teaching and sharing some of our gifts. And we started to serve and do all these things. And we have met such amazing people at the church in the process. And we've seen many people come to Christ in it. And now we feel like this is our family. Our kids consider this place our family. But I look back at that point when there could have been the option to say, I don't know if it's the right thing because I'm not getting what I want out of it. And it's flipping it. And I think something that it draws to mind is a verse in the Bible, Philippians 2:3, which says, do nothing out of vain conceit, but put others as higher than yourself. And that verse to me rings so true. If you're in a moment in life when you're not feeling like you're getting the love, you're getting the attention, the accolades, you're not getting that respect that you feel like you deserve, take a look real quick at what you're valuing as the highest. Is it yourself? Are you feeling like you should be the one that's getting it all along? Or are you turning back towards those around you and saying, what can I do to pour into them and to love on them?
Correct.
And it's amazing how you'll get that in return.
Servant leadership. I mean, it's the most important principle of leadership, right? Is you have to be willing to listen, right, to the word, educate yourself, to be available to teach and serve others, right? I think that's something that you and your wife learned through that process.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is that God put that spiritual gift in you. That's that leadership gift. And oftentimes as leaders, we have this self-sabotage, right? It's like, well, like how can I get something out of this, right? Or these people, or how do I get them to perform? And like, how do I win, right? And it's so cool that you're vulnerable enough to talk about it, to just be like, man, I really wanted the church to give me something.
Amen.
As opposed to the other way around. It's like, man, I should be giving my gift to the church. And through that servant leadership, you actually get it tenfold. And you've seen families grow. You've seen marriages grow. And now, oddly enough, you're getting out of the church what God is like, it's right here, dude. You didn't need to go anywhere else.
No.
And sometimes
people
you
go
don't-
to get fed, led. They feel like they're starving spiritually, all those things. And sometimes it's like, no. The most beautiful times is when you serve others.
Amen.
Correct.
100%.
Yes, and that's an amazing part about it is many times you don't even realize it. It's not overnight. It's when you've stopped keeping track. It's when you've just poured into and said, "This is just what I'm going to do now. I'm just doing this day after day because I love it, because I want to do that, right?" And that's when it's only when you look back and take a moment like this and say, "Wait a second, if I look back at this history, oh wow, like these are the things I was praying for back then, and I didn't think I would even get."
Yeah.
And then you just start walking. You just start moving
One foot in front
forward.
of the other.
One foot in front of the other, exactly right. And you surround yourself with people that will love on you too, and you love right back on them, and it just starts to accumulate over time.
Makes it
Praise
sound
God.
so easy, but this guy, for listeners, he's actually an endurance runner as
Yes.
well, right? That's like something that
So
you do, like
half
side hobbies and all that.
Half marathons or half triathlons?
A little bit of both. So
Okay.
I just finished a half Ironman in October out here in Tempe, and I'm training for a marathon this year. It's just kind of to try different ones. I do a lot of obstacle course races, and I actually like them more so now than I think I did as a younger man, because I see the value of, well, one, just the health benefits of it, and the way I feel, and the way I can even use that time, alone on my bike by myself to just kind of meditate and just talk to God and just see beautiful
God.
scenery, but also too, I think it's a excellent corollary to what our faith looks like. There's a lot of verses in the Bible that talk about endurance and running your race and finishing your race. And many times what's amazing about training for these things is actually the journey along the way. Sometimes you get to the end and it's like, oh, I'm done with all that. I really enjoyed the moments of the struggle in the midst of it, the people that I got to meet, those I got to bring into it and encourage.
Right.
That was one thing that I will encourage anyone is go try. Go try something. It doesn't have to be a big thing. I didn't start with a big race one day. Just do something that you can do and get excited about it and love on it and pour into it. Lean into that struggle.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how over time it will build up this body of work. And that's exactly what we're talking about right here with people.
That's what you did in the church, is that you said the same thing, right? Your wife and you were called to lean in, right? It's the same thing, like, just so you guys know, so Andrew is definitely disciplined. I mean, it takes a lot of discipline with that, raising the family, leaning into the church. And it's not that you're called to come in and be perfect, right? You talked about how authentic, the authentic piece of leadership, right? It takes authenticity, discipline, and continuing to grow in your leadership skills, right? And so I think that that's the cool principle too, is that you're not coming into the church and just buttoning up and just saying, okay, cool,
no.
like my wife and I got it together, like you guys need to learn from us. It's like you're being authentic about it.
So we're coming to a close, and with the close, I'd just like to ask, what would you like to share with men, little nuggets that they can take home, kind of chew on, that culminates this whole conversation we've had this afternoon?
Yeah, that's. I would say, especially for men that are in leadership positions, looking to better lead their family, what they're looking like, what that looks like in whatever capacity it is, whether you're leading 1 or 100 or 1,000, your group of family that's around you, the audience that you have in front of you, no matter how big or how small it is for you to put them as first. Put your Lord as highest, but them next around you and lean into them and pour into them and look after their best interest. Listen, seek to understand what those needs are around you and fill that role. Be that person that can continue to drive and move forward along the way. I love a quote by John C. Maxwell about what leadership is, which is know the way, go the way, show the way. And that's what good leaders do in whatever capacity they are. So continue to develop your own skills and abilities, continue to understand what that fundamental end goal is in terms of following Christ and following God there, and then what your role is on earth in terms of what we need to do in our careers and in our families, and then go do it and get after it.
Yeah.
It's okay if you stumble a bit. It's going to
Absolutely.
take that dedication and consistency, but you're going to look back years later and say, man, I'm glad I took the first step. I'm glad I leaned in and didn't run away.
Love it. Love it. So we'll leave you guys with that. Andrew, thank you so much for coming through and teaching us about this, where we're sitting here learning how to live and leave a godly legacy. And these gems that you've shared with us about leadership is how you do it. So thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe and check us out there. Like this information, and don't forget to share it with some of those other leaders that you know out there. Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrew.
Andrew, thank you
guys.
so much.
Yeah.
Bless you hundredfold.
Bless you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Next time on the Legacy Men's Podcast.
Love Jesus Christ authentically. Love your wife faithfully. Love your children sacrificially. Be present with your family. Your wife is not your enemy.
Nope.
If you're having a rough time in your marriage, Cornerstone has resources to help you guys deal with that. There's a reason you fell in love with her. There's a reason that you're together. To the extent possible, keep that going. But she's not your enemy. And she can show things in your life if you just have some humility, let her work off some of the rough spots in your life. Because I got news, you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. And our wives are really good in a loving way, hopefully, about saying, hey, you know what, you needed to do this differently. You needed to do that differently. Or, hey, I'm supporting you 100%.
Right.
And you need to have that intimacy. You should just get a quick advertisement in. Pray with your wife. Pray with your wife. Oh, and
Amen.
pray with your wife.